For me, it was just another job. Come, fix, leave. But she opened the door, looked at me, and said, "You're handsome." I knew this visit wouldn't be ordinary. I'm Ethan, 24 years old, born and raised in Seattle. I work as an electrician for a small, family-owned company on the North End. Nothing glamorous, but it keeps my schedule full and my hands busy. Most days are a mix of apartments with buzzing outlets, old houses with breaker panels that look like they belong in a museum, and the occasional office building with flickering lights that no one wants to deal with. That morning started like any other. I grabbed a coffee, checked my schedule, and saw a new service call marked urgent. The address stood out right away. Magnolia Hills, not a place I usually get dispatched to. Most of the homes there are the kind you only see in magazines or realtor Instagram posts. Big, quiet, and way out of my league. I pulled up to the gate, took a deep breath, and drove through. The house was something else, a wide driveway that curved around a water feature, neatly clipped hedges, and big glass windows that looked like they belonged in a gallery. Everything was clean, pristine. Even the mailbox looked like it cost more than my work boots. I parked and walked toward the front entrance, toolbox in hand. I expected someone older, maybe retired, or one of those house managers who usually meets you at the door and barely makes eye contact. Instead, she opened it herself. "Hi," she said, and I swear I paused for half a second before replying. She was tall, maybe in her early 40s, but carried herself like someone who didn't really think about age. Long, dark hair, soft waves tied loosely, not overly done. She wore a crisp white button-up shirt tucked into high-waisted slacks, barefoot, like she didn't expect to step outside. Everything about her was subtle and composed, but somehow striking, like she'd walked out of a lifestyle ad, only with more gravity. "You must be Ethan," she said, her tone calm but direct. "Come in." "Yeah," I nodded, trying not to fumble my words. "I'm here for the garage light issue." She motioned down a side hallway. "They've been shorting out. Sometimes they turn on, sometimes not. It's irritating." The garage was spotless, like everything else. A sleek black Porsche parked to the side, racks neatly arranged with tools that probably hadn't been touched in years. I set my toolbox down and started checking the light fixtures while she lingered near the doorframe, arms crossed. The problem was a faulty motion sensor, poorly wired into the system. I explained it to her in simple terms, not wanting to overcomplicate it, and she just nodded, listening closely, like she was used to understanding things on the first pass. "You're pretty efficient," she said casually as I clipped the new sensor into place. "And pretty handsome, too." I glanced up thinking I'd misheard. "Sorry," she added, almost like an afterthought, but her expression didn't shift. "I just say what I think sometimes." I laughed under my breath, caught between surprise and awkwardness. "Thanks. That's not something I usually hear on a service call." She smirked, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and then walked off without another word. I stood there for a moment, holding a pair of wire strippers, unsure if that had really just happened or if I'd imagined it. It took me another half hour to finish up, rewired the fixture, tested the motion range, triple-checked the connections. It wasn't a complicated job, but my mind wasn't exactly on the wiring anymore. I kept catching myself glancing toward the interior door, wondering if she'd come back or if I'd imagined her tone entirely. When I finally packed up and went to find her to confirm everything was working, she was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. "All set," I told her. "Lights should be fine now." I replaced the sensor and rewired the connection. She turned to look at me, leaning slightly against the marble counter. "You're good at what you do, Ethan." "Thanks," I said, keeping it light. "I try." She walked with me to the door, the silence between us oddly comfortable now. Just before I stepped outside, she added, "It's rare to meet someone who knows what they're doing and isn't trying to impress anyone." I smiled. "Well, I don't get a lot of opportunities to impress someone like you anyway." She laughed softly, eyes meeting mine for just a beat longer than necessary. As I got into my truck and pulled away, I found myself watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror, trying to make sense of the feeling I just left with. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, it was something else. Something in the way she saw me. And for the rest of that day, No matter how many outlets or switch plates I handled, I couldn't stop thinking about Olivia. I didn't expect to hear from her again. Most clients don't reach out unless something breaks. And when I left Olivia's place, I figured that was the end of it. A strange, memorable job, sure, but nothing more. Still, for the next couple of days, I kept thinking about her. That house, the way she'd looked at me, the way she said what was on her mind without flinching. It was rare, that kind of confidence, the kind that didn't need to fill silence to feel in control. On Wednesday, just as I was finishing up a job downtown, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, it's Olivia from the garage. Hope I'm not being too forward." I stared at the screen for a second, almost thinking it was a prank, but then another message followed. "I was wondering if you were free this weekend, not for a repair, just to hang out." That word, hang out, hit different. It wasn't dinner or drinks or anything official, but it also wasn't small talk, not the kind of thing someone like her would toss out just to be polite. I didn't reply right away. I read it again, thought about how weird it would be, how different our lives were, how someone so composed could even want to spend time with someone like me. But the truth, I was curious, so I texted back. "Saturday works. Just let me know the plan." She sent a thumbs up and then nothing else, just like that. That whole week, I couldn't focus properly. My jobs felt mechanical, like my hands were working while my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be her again, but she didn't send anything more, just a plan to meet on Saturday and a time. Saturday afternoon rolled around faster than I expected. I wore jeans and a clean black tee, nothing fancy but not work-stained either. I didn't know what I was dressing for. Coffee? A walk? I had no idea. Then, right on time, a low hum pulled me to the window. A black Porsche rolled up to the curb. She was behind the wheel, sunglasses on, one hand on the wheel, like she'd done this kind of thing before. She stepped out in dark jeans and a simple cream sweater, hair tied back, no jewelry, no heels. Still, she looked like someone from another world, one that moved at a slower, more deliberate pace. "Hi," she said when I opened the door, like it was totally normal to be picking up a 24-year-old electrician on a weekend. "Hey," I said, closing the door behind me, still not sure what I was getting into. We drove in silence at first, not awkward, just quiet, the kind where you can hear the road and the wind and your own heartbeat. The buildings turned into trees, the road narrowed, and then we pulled into a gravel lot next to a trailhead with no signs. "Come on," she said, grabbing a small backpack from the back seat. "It's not far." The trail wound down through mossy trees, the sound of rushing water growing louder with each step. Finally, we reached a clearing, and there it was, a secluded waterfall, low and steady, pouring into a shallow pool, surrounded by rocks, like something out of a forgotten postcard. She stepped out onto a large flat rock, kicked off her shoes, and sat down. I followed, feeling like I'd stumbled into some private part of her world. We didn't talk for a while, just listened to the water, the sunlight filtered through the trees, flickering across her skin. It was peaceful, more than I had expected. Then softly she spoke. "I don't usually do things like this." I looked over, waiting. "People see me and they make assumptions," she said. "They think I've got everything figured out, that I must be old or difficult or high maintenance. Truth is, I'm just tired of pretending all the time." I nodded, unsure what to say, but she didn't need a response. "You don't look at me like that," she added. "You actually listen." I wasn't used to being noticed that way. Most of my life, people talk at you, not to you. But Olivia had this way of speaking that didn't feel rehearsed, like she was peeling back layers on purpose, not for attention, just for honesty. We talked about work, family, growing up in opposite worlds. She came from money, pressure, and polished expectations. I came from hard work, calloused hands, and taking pride in fixing what others ignored. When the sun dipped lower, she finally stood up, brushing off her jeans. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I know this was random." "Yeah," I said, smiling, "but in a good way." We drove back into the city as the sky turned orange, the silence between us a little different now, softer, somehow familiar. She dropped me off at my place with a quiet, "See you soon." As I stood there on the sidewalk watching the Porsche glide away, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I just felt drawn in. Whatever this was, whatever it could become, it didn't feel like a job anymore. Saturday morning came quicker than I expected. I'd spent most of the week wondering if she'd text again, and then Thursday evening she did. Just a simple message. Pick you up Saturday noon. Dress for outside. That was it. No emoji, no details. Just like before with Olivia, everything felt understated but intentional. Like she never wasted words but still somehow said a lot. I didn't even ask where we were going. I figured if she wanted me to know, she'd tell me. And anyway, the mystery was part of it now. I'd stopped trying to make sense of the situation. It wasn't normal, but it also wasn't uncomfortable. It just was. I stood on the curb, and right on time, that Porsche eased up to the sidewalk. Clean, matte black. The engine purred like it belonged in a movie. When the window rolled down, she was there in dark sunglasses, hair pulled back, wearing a black hoodie and tight-fitting hiking pants. She looked like someone who had nothing to prove, but still turned heads without meaning to. "You ready?" she asked, like we'd done this a dozen times. I nodded and got in. The seats were soft and low, the kind that make you sit straighter without meaning to. I caught my reflection in the side mirror and suddenly became hyper-aware of my clothes. Basic jeans, clean sneakers, a hoodie that didn't have paint on it for once. Still, I felt out of place next to her, like I'd wandered into someone else's world by accident, and she hadn't kicked me out yet. The ride took us far outside the city, through winding back roads, past small towns, forests, and hills I'd never seen before. Every now and then, Olivia would hum along to the music playing low through the speakers, some soft indie band I didn't recognize. The whole time she drove like she'd been down that road 100 times, one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually in her lap. "You always take people out like this?" I asked halfway through the trying to sound casual. She laughed softly, eyes on the road. "No, I don't even usually talk to the electrician." I smiled at that. "Guess I'm lucky." "Guess I was bored," she said with a smirk. Eventually, we turned down a gravel path I never would have noticed if I'd driven past it on my own. After a few slow minutes, the trees opened up into a clearing. There was a waterfall, not massive, but wide and steady, pouring into a rock-lined pool with soft moss growing all around it. No one else was there, just the sound of water, birds, and leaves rustling. She parked without a word and stepped out, grabbing a small cooler from the back seat. "I found this spot years ago," she said. "I come here when I need to feel like myself again." I followed her down a narrow path to a flat area near the water. She tossed a blanket onto the ground and sat cross-legged, opening the cooler like this was her weekend ritual. There were sandwiches, cut fruit, sparkling water in glass bottles. Nothing extravagant, but it was all arranged like she cared about the details. We sat on the blanket, eating quietly at first. Then the conversation just started. She asked about my childhood, my mom's bakery, the first time I ever got shocked messing with an outlet at age 11. I asked her about growing up in Mercer Island, private schools, summer camps in Europe. She rolled her eyes at half of it, like it embarrassed her now. "I spent a long time pretending to like people I didn't even respect," she admitted, brushing a crumb off her lap. "You grow up thinking that's just life, but it drains you." I nodded. "So why me? Why call me? I mean, I fixed your light." "Yeah, but this," she gestured at the waterfall, the food, the quiet. "This is different." She didn't answer right away, just looked out at the water, the reflection of trees rippling slightly with the breeze. "Because when you were in my garage," she said slowly, "you didn't try to impress me. You weren't intimidated. You just did your job, and you did it well." Then she looked at me, more serious than I'd seen her. "And when I said you were handsome, you didn't take it as an invitation. You just took it for what it was." I felt myself tense a little, not defensive, just unsure what to say. "You made me feel seen," she added. "Not observed, seen." That hit something in me I wasn't expecting. The rest of the afternoon passed with dips of silence, short laughs, and long looks that didn't need translating. We took off our shoes and sat with our feet in the cold water. She told me about her late 20s, the years she built her company, The pressure of being the woman everyone else relied on, and how exhausting it was never to be allowed to just bear them. At one point, she leaned back on her hands, looking up at the sky. I don't know where this is going, she said, but I like not having to pretend around you. I didn't say anything, I just nodded because I felt it too. We stayed until the sun dipped low behind the trees. The air turned cool and the shadows stretched long across the water. When we walked back to the car, our hands brushed once. Neither of us pulled away. We didn't say much on the drive back, but the silence had changed, and deep down, I knew this wasn't just a ride anymore. The following week passed in a blur. I worked the usual jobs, wiring in a remodel, replacing a breaker box in an old Craftsman, chasing down a short that turned out to be a half-chewed wire from a squirrel, but my mind wasn't fully in it. Every free moment, I kept replaying Saturday in my head, the way she looked at me across that blanket, how her voice softened when she talked about her life, how she didn't flinch when the silence stretched out. I'd been around confident people before, clients, supervisors, the occasional date who seemed like they were performing more than just showing up. But Olivia wasn't like that. She didn't need to be anything, and that made her more intriguing than anyone I'd ever met. By Wednesday, I caved and sent her a message. "You around this weekend?" She replied in minutes. "Possibly. What's the occasion?" "I figured you might want to be seen again." She didn't text back. Not immediately. Hours passed, enough time for me to feel like maybe I'd pushed too far. But then later that night, just before I was about to crash for the night, another message popped up. "Come by Saturday morning. I'll make coffee." When I showed up, the front door was already unlocked. I knocked anyway, out of habit. "In the back," she called. I stepped through the pristine living room and out to the back patio, where she was sitting barefoot, feet up on a lounge chair, holding a steaming mug, no makeup, hair down and messy. She looked like someone who hadn't checked the time all morning, and she looked better than I'd ever seen her. "You're early," she said without getting up. "You said morning." She nodded and handed me a second mug, black coffee, strong and hot. We sat quietly for a while, just sipping and watching the clouds move across the sky. She pulled a light blanket over her legs, and the hem barely brushed against my knee. I didn't move. "I was supposed to have a meeting today," she said eventually. "Canceled it." "Why?" Didn't feel like pretending. She didn't have to explain. I knew exactly what she meant. After a while, she stood up and said, "Come with me." I followed her through the hallway and into a room I hadn't seen before. It smelled faintly of paint and linseed oil. Big windows faced the garden, and the walls were lined with unfinished canvases, abstracts, some colorful, some just charcoal outlines. An old wooden easel stood in the middle, half covered by a draped linen cloth. "This is my studio," she said. "Not many people get to see it." It was nothing like the rest of her house. In here, there were stains on the floor, smudges of paint on the baseboards, a worn-out stool in the corner. It felt real. "I come in here when I need to drop the act," she said. "No business, no hosting, no curated image." "I get it," I said. "For me, it's my car. Nothing fancy, but it's the only place I can sit and breathe sometimes." She looked at me for a second longer than necessary, then walked over to one of the canvases and pulled the cloth off. It was a painting, half finished, lots of bold strokes and space left open. Something about it felt like a question she hadn't answered yet. "I haven't painted in weeks," she said. "Not since before you came by." "Why not?" She shrugged. "I think I was waiting for something to feel different." We didn't say much after that, just stood there, the quiet thick around us. Then she stepped closer, slowly, like she was still deciding something. She was only a few inches away now. Her hand touched my arm first, lightly, like she was checking to see if I'd pull back. I didn't. Then she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic thing. No orchestral music, no deep breath before, just her lips brushing mine, like a thought spoken out loud. Soft, clear, intentional. When we pulled apart, she didn't say anything. Neither did I. She just rested her forehead lightly against mine, and for a few seconds, we just stood there, not needing to fill the silence. I'm not looking for something serious, she said quietly. I've done the marriage, Karim, the expectations, the pressure. I just want something honest. I can do honest, I said. She smiled finally like she'd been waiting to hear that. We ended up spending the rest of the day on the patio talking, laughing. She made pasta with roasted vegetables, and I cleaned up afterward while she picked music on the speaker. It felt easy, familiar, like we'd skipped the usual beginning and gone straight to whatever this was. When I left that evening, she walked me to the door. No dramatic goodbye, just a quiet kiss and a soft, drive safe. I sat in my truck for a minute before starting the engine, just letting it all sink in. This wasn't casual anymore, but I didn't want it to be. It was my turn to plan something. After that day at Olivia's house, her studio, the kiss, the things we said without saying much, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not in a fantasy kind of way, just in this grounded, steady rhythm, like she was part of my day, whether she was there or not. I figured it couldn't always be her picking me up in a Porsche and whisking me away to waterfall hideouts. I wanted to do something simple, real, something that felt like me. So I sent her a message late Thursday night. Picnic Saturday, nothing fancy, just you, me, and sandwiches. She replied 3 minutes later, I'll bring the lemonade. That Saturday was one of those almost summer days, warm sun, a few scattered clouds, just enough breeze to keep things from getting sticky. I packed a cooler with turkey and cheddar sandwiches, grapes, chips, and some oatmeal cookies from a bakery I liked. Nothing complicated, just stuff I knew wouldn't try too hard. We met at Discovery Park, out on the far edge near the cliffs. It wasn't private, but it was quiet enough to feel like we had our own little patch of grass overlooking the water. When Olivia showed up, I had to blink for a second. She wasn't the composed, polished version of herself I'd first met. She wore joggers and a loose-fit t-shirt, no jewelry, no makeup. Her hair was pulled up in a messy knot, and she was carrying a woven tote bag and a big bottle of lemonade. You weren't kidding, she said, glancing at the cooler. This really is a picnic. Told you, I said, spreading out the blanket. No catering, no hidden waterfalls, just deli meat and sunshine. She sat down cross-legged beside me and gave a soft laugh. Good. I needed that. We ate slowly, the kind of unhurried chewing that comes with trust. Between bites, we talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her favorite book growing up, the one she read every summer like a ritual. I told her about the time I almost dropped out of trade school because I thought I wasn't smart enough to get through it. She listened, not the way people usually pretend to listen. She really listened. Sometimes her brow would furrow when I said something personal, and she'd nod quietly, letting it land. You don't talk like a guy in his 20s, she said at one point. I shrugged. Life moves quick when you don't have much to fall back on. She looked at me then like she was trying to read something behind my face. And what do you want to move toward? I thought about it. No one really asked me questions like that. Most of the time it was, can you fix this, or when will it be done? But not, what do you want? Stability, I guess, I said, but on my own terms, my own shop, my own schedule. Nothing huge, just enough to not have to answer to people who don't know what they're doing. She smiled, sipping her lemonade. That's more ambition than most people I know with degrees and trust funds. The sun climbed higher, and we kicked our shoes off. Olivia lay back on the blanket, one arm draped over her eyes to block the light, and I lay beside her, feeling the heat through the fabric underneath us. Then, without any shift in tone or mood, she said, when I was 19, I almost dropped out of college. I turned my head to look at her, surprised. Everyone thought I had it together, she continued, but I felt like I was drowning. I didn't know what I wanted, just what was expected. I ended up staying, obviously, got the degree, built the company, bought the house, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just stepped off the path. Would you take it back? I asked. She thought about it for a long second. No, but I think I admire the people who never stepped on it to begin with. We lay there in silence for a while after that. Not heavy, just thoughtful. The wind rustled through the trees and a bird chirped somewhere in the distance. Then, as if it had been there waiting all along, the moment unfolded. She turned her head toward me, Eyes soft, lips parted just slightly. No big lean in, no dramatic pause. Just a slow, quiet shift until her mouth was close enough to mine that neither of us had to move far. The kiss happened like a whisper, no urgency, no need to prove anything. Just the warmth of her breath, the light press of her hand on my arm, the soft taste of lemonade on her lips. When we pulled apart, she looked down and gave a half smile. You sure you're okay with this? With what? This? The difference? I sat up and looked at her, brushing a strand of hair off her cheek. You make me forget about the math. She laughed, resting her forehead against mine. Good answer. We stayed until the sun started its slow descent, the blanket now scattered with crumbs and grape stem and empty cookie wrappers. I walked her back to her car, our fingers brushing again, but this time staying laced for a while before gently letting go. No promises were made, no labels were spoken, but something had shifted. We weren't circling each other anymore. We'd found center. The first time I saw Olivia's house from the inside after dark, it felt like being let in on a secret. She invited me over for dinner the following week, not with a big build-up, just a simple message. Come by Thursday night, I'll cook. Don't eat before. I showed up wearing jeans that didn't have drywall dust on them and a clean gray t-shirt. She opened the door barefoot, hair tied back loosely, wearing a black sweater and linen pants. No jewelry, no effort to impress. She didn't need to. The house felt different at night, softer, warmer, lights dimmed low, music humming in the background. Old jazz, nothing fancy. The kind of music that didn't ask for attention but filled the space anyway. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something roasted. She handed me a glass of red wine and went back to stirring a pan on the stove, like this was just another Thursday. I leaned against the counter and watched her move, relaxed, totally in control, not performing. It made me feel at ease in a way I hadn't expected. You cook often? I asked. When I feel like feeding someone, she said with a quick glance and a smirk. I don't bother much for myself. The food was simple, roasted chicken, asparagus, mashed potatoes with way more butter than she was willing to admit, but it tasted like comfort, like she actually cared about making it right, not just impressive. We ate at her dining table, lit by a single hanging bulb. The whole room felt like it had been designed to make you slow down. Even the chairs were the kind you sink into, not the stiff, formal kind. Do you ever miss living with someone? I asked as I cut into my chicken. She paused, fork midair. Sometimes, not the noise or the expectations, but the small things, coffee cups left out, doors that creak, someone to notice the new paint smell. I nodded, chewing slowly. And you? She asked. Ever lived with anyone? No, I said, only roommates. One of them used to leave open cans of tuna in the sink. That cured me of ever wanting to live with anyone again for a while. She laughed, low and real. That might do it. After dinner, she refilled our glasses and said, Come on, I want to show you something. She led me down a short hallway to a door I hadn't noticed before. When she opened it, I smelled paint again. Same scent as the last time. It was her studio, but this time she didn't just show it. She stepped in, barefoot on the paint-speckled floor, and moved toward a canvas she'd started. Light from a small lamp cast shadows across her profile. I painted this after you left the other day, she said quietly. I stepped closer. It was abstract, like the others, but something about it felt raw. Wide brushstrokes, a lot of white space, and one streak of dark red that cut diagonally across the canvas. Looks like movement, I said. Feels like relief, she replied. Like exhaling. She looked over her shoulder at me then, eyes softer than before. I don't usually let people in here. Then I'll take that as a compliment. You should. She stepped toward me, stopping just inches away. The air between us felt charged again. Not heavy, not rushed, just filled with that unspoken rhythm we seemed to keep finding. When she kissed me, it wasn't like the first time. This one was slower, deeper, not cautious, intentional. Her hands rested at my chest for a moment, then moved up around my neck. I let mine find her waist. She fit against me like she'd always been there. We didn't say anything, didn't need to. She led me back down the hallway to her bedroom with the same quiet confidence she did everything else. Without ceremony, without rush, Just this silent understanding that it felt right. The room was dim, soft sheets, open windows letting in the sound of leaves rustling outside. She lay next to me afterward, tucked under my arm, legs tangled, breathing slow. We didn't talk much. She just traced her fingers along the inside of my wrist, and I just held her like that was the most natural thing in the world. Eventually she whispered, "You feel safe to me." That stayed with me. Not fun, not exciting, safe, not in a boring way, in a way that meant trust. I woke up and watched her sleep for a while. The streetlights outside cast a soft glow across her shoulder. And for a second, I thought about how strange this all was, how I got here from a broken light fixture, how two people who shouldn't make sense on paper could fit this easily in practice. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to break the quiet, so I stayed there, steady and still, breathing in sync with someone who, little by little, was letting me in. Things didn't get serious because we had a conversation about it. They got serious because we stopped pretending otherwise. After that night in her studio, after falling asleep with her head on my chest, after that quiet, steady warmth between us, it just felt understood. We didn't label anything, there was no need. But I started seeing more of her world, and it was nothing like mine. The first event she invited me to was a charity art gala. I almost said no. I didn't own a suit, and I hadn't been in a room like that since prom. But Olivia insisted, not in a pushy way, more like she wanted to see what it would feel like having me there. "It's not about dressing up," she said over the phone. "It's about showing up." So I rented a suit, basic black, nothing flashy. When I picked her up, yes, in my truck, which she insisted on, she stepped out of her house in a dark green dress that made her look like she'd been carved out of confidence itself. Hair up, subtle jewelry, that same calm expression she always wore when she was about to walk into a room that expected something from her. "You clean up well," she said, stepping into the passenger seat. "You look like money," I replied. She smirked. "Don't worry, they were all more nervous than you are." The event was at a downtown rooftop space with string lights, waiters carrying champagne flutes, and a lot of people who talked with their hands and said things like pivot and capital vision. I stuck to the edge at first, sipping ginger ale from a short glass and scanning the crowd for a familiar face that wasn't there. Olivia moved through the room like she belonged, because she did. People knew her. Some leaned in to greet her with the kind of smiles you only wear around power. Others gave those quick glances at me, then back to her, trying to do the math. She introduced me when it made sense, didn't overdo it, didn't underplay it either. "This is Ethan," she said once. "He fixes what breaks." I liked that. After a while, she slipped away to talk to someone across the room, and I ended up in a quiet corner with another guy who looked just as out of place. "You here with someone?" he asked, nursing a seltzer. "Yeah," I said. "Sort of." He nodded, then gestured toward Olivia. "Her?" "Yeah." He gave a low whistle. "Man, bold." I laughed quietly. "Something like that." Later that night, back at her place, we kicked our shoes off in the front hall and collapsed onto the couch. She pulled the pins from her hair and let it fall loose around her shoulders. "Sorry," she said. "That was probably a lot." "Nah," I said, "just enough." She turned toward me, legs folded under her, expression softer now. "I like having you there, even if I don't know how to network or talk about hedge funds." "Especially because of that," she said. "You don't try to impress anyone. That's rare." I smiled. "I'm just glad they had ginger ale." We fell into a rhythm after that. She'd still go to her meetings, still get calls late into the evening from people whose names I didn't recognize. But sometimes she'd text me in the middle of the day just to say she was thinking about lunch, or that a painting in her studio finally made sense. And I started thinking beyond the daily grind. For the first time in a long time, I thought about building something of my own, not just waiting for job tickets from dispatch. A business, my name on the van, my schedule, my rules. I told Olivia about it one night while we sat on the back patio, stars overhead, blanket around her shoulders, my fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass. "I've been thinking about going out on my own," I said, "doing repairs, electrical, home upgrades, just all of it." She didn't blink. "Do it," I laughed. It's not that simple. It is, she said. You're talented, you're reliable, you care about people's homes. That's more than half the battle. You think people will hire a guy like me without a big company name? They'll hire you because of who you are, she said. We'll figure out branding. I've helped enough startups fake it till they made it. This won't be faking. That was the first time I let the idea feel real. Her world wasn't changing mine, but it was opening something up inside me, a part I hadn't fed in a long time. She wasn't trying to fix me or elevate me. She just saw something in me I hadn't given myself permission to look at yet, and she wanted to help build it, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. That made all the difference. The name came to us one night while we were sitting on the floor of her living room, surrounded by takeout containers and sketches on printer paper. I was doodling ideas for a logo with a pencil while she sipped tea and scrolled through font samples on her tablet. Fix well, she said, almost offhandedly. Simple, direct, clean. I looked up. Fix well. Yeah, you fix things and you do it well. It sounds like something people would remember. I repeated it under my breath a few times. It felt good in my mouth, like it belonged. That night, Fixwell was born. No ceremony, no formal pitch deck, just two people on a hardwood floor dreaming into the space between them. In the weeks that followed, we met up more than ever. Sometimes it was about business, logo design, website layout, pricing strategy. Sometimes it was about nothing at all. Late night drives, Sunday morning coffee, sitting side by side while she painted and I made notes on a client list. We still kept things quiet, not because we were hiding anything, but because what we had didn't need an audience. One Sunday, we went back to the waterfall. She suggested it on a whim. I packed a thermos of coffee and a couple of muffins. She wore hiking boots in that same oversized hoodie I loved, the one that swallowed her sleeves and made her look more girl than woman for once. When we got to the clearing, everything looked the same, but it felt different, more familiar, more ours. We sat on the same rocks as before, our legs stretched out toward the water. She leaned her head on my shoulder while I poured the coffee. Hard to believe this started over a busted motion sensor, I said. She laughed. You never know what's going to change your life. We didn't talk much after that. The water did most of the work, but I could feel the weight of it all. How far we'd come, how much we'd unraveled, how much we'd chosen to keep. I never thought I'd fall for someone like you, she said, still looking at the water. Someone younger? I asked. No, someone real. I didn't say anything for a minute, just let the words settle. I never imagined a client would change my life, I said finally, but you did. She reached over and laced her fingers with mine, slow and certain. We stayed like that for a long time, just breathing in sync, letting the moment wrap around us. There was no grand declaration, no need for big plans, but we had something quiet, something that had taken shape, not through promises or definitions, but through time, presence, and choices made in small, steady ways. Back in the city, Olivia helped me put together the website. She booked a photographer friend to take pictures of me working, real ones, not posed, and wrote the copy for the About section herself. She even made business cards that didn't look cheesy. Fixwell was up and running within a month. I got my first independent client through a friend of hers, then a neighbor, then someone who found the site online. Soon the van didn't feel like someone else's dream. It felt like mine. She never made a big deal about helping. She never used it as leverage. In fact, she stayed in the background more than I expected. I just like seeing you move through the world like this, she told me once, watching me install a dimmer switch in her guest room. You're built for this. And in return, I learned how to step into her world without losing myself. I went to a few more events, not as decoration, not as the guy who didn't belong, but as someone she chose to stand beside her. She didn't need me to be flashy. She just needed me to be real. We started spending more nights together, some at her place, some at mine. I didn't move in. We didn't talk about that yet. But our lives were weaving together in quiet, ordinary ways. Shared groceries, toothbrushes left behind, voicemail reminders to grab coffee beans. It wasn't perfect, We had moments where our differences showed habits, expectations, communication styles, but nothing broke us. We were two people learning how to be in something real without pretending to have all the answers. One morning, a few months later, I woke up in her bed, sun streaming through the curtains, and she was already in the kitchen making coffee, humming some tune under her breath. I watched her for a moment, barefoot, hair messy, my Fixwell hoodie draped around her shoulders, and I felt it. Not fireworks, not some dramatic movie scene swell, just peace, like I'd found something steady, something good, something worth choosing again and again and again. And so we did. What does it mean to find someone who sees you not as a role you play, but as the person you are beneath it all? Reflect on Ethan and Olivia's story and ask yourself, when have you felt truly seen, not for what you do, but for who you are? Their journey, sparked by a simple joy and a bold compliment, invites us to explore a vital lesson. The most profound connections often begin in unexpected moments, where authenticity overpowers pretense. What can we learn from their quiet intimacy, from stolen glances to shared dreams under the stars? Doesn't it push us to question how often we hide our true selves to fit the world's expectations? Ethan, an electrician with a routine life, steps into Olivia's world and discovers a space where he's valued for his presence, not his performance. Her words, "Handsome guys don't usually fix wires," open a door to a bond that's raw and real, unburdened by labels. Their story, built on late-night talks, waterfall picnics, and mutual support, teaches us that vulnerability can be a strength, fostering connections that inspire growth. Ethan's leap from fixing wires to dreaming of Fixwell mirrors how genuine relationships can unlock our potential. Haven't we all longed for someone who believes in us enough to spark change? Their quiet rebellion against invention reminds us to embrace the moments that make us feel mighty bum, even when they defy the ordinary. When have you felt seen in a way that changed you? What dreams has a connection inspired you to chase? Share your story in the comments. Your words might light a spark for someone else. If this tale resonated, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Let's keep uncovering the lessons that make life real together.